Welcome to Native Exiles, Alderwood Community Church's podcast, where we talk about following Jesus in the tension of being in the world, but not of it. And this is our Election Day special. You're going to get Steve and I's reaction to the big news of the election. Let's jump into it. Well, Steve, here we are. A lot of build up to today, but it's finally here.
A lot of waiting, a lot of wondering, and here we are. We now know the identity of the next president of the United States of America. Some of our friends are really bumming today, Wyatt. Full of a lot of anxiety. What would you say to them?
Yeah, a lot of Christians upset. I mean, quite understandable, to be honest. You know, our next president is incredibly divisive. In so many ways, they try to appeal to Christians throughout the election and, you know, kind of act like a Christian, speak Christianese to try to draw church people in. But there's a lot of reasons for skepticism about that, their personal life, you know, just even some of the way that the conversation was being had in this election cycle didn't really look like the Beatitudes in any significant way. A lot of coarse language, a lot of unfounded accusations being made, but nothing we can do about it now. Election's over, and Christians aren't happy.
They are not happy. And you know what? I'm looking at you right now and I'm thinking, you actually don't know who the next president of the United States is.
Okay, busted. You're right. I don't. This is October 23rd, and the election is still 13 days away.
But everything you just said
doesn't
is
matter.
Still true.
Yeah, everything I said is true of either candidate, and I promise you, Christians will not be happy on November 5th, November 6th. Now, some might be. Some Christians will be thrilled that someone wins, whether it's Kamala or it's Trump, but a lot will not be. And what we're concerned about today is not so much the ramifications of what if so-and-so wins or what it will look like. What we want to have today is what is true on November 6th when we wake up, no matter what. What is true, whether Trump is going to be in the White House again in 2025 or Kamala is going to be, and especially like, how do Christians stay engaged in politics after the election? We're usually very concerned about politics on 2 and really 4 year cycles when election comes up, but our political engagement as followers of Jesus is so much bigger than just a vote that we cast in an election. And so that's the conversation today, and I'm looking forward to having it with you.
Yeah, we want to give you 5 suggestions for how you can do that. And you were just alluding to it. I mean, some people are exulting today, some people are ecstatic, and some people think the world has ended, and somewhere in between. And I think we have to acknowledge there's so many responses in the audience that's listening right now. Some of us are just like, can I just put my head back in the sand, please? For not one more political commercial, please. But regardless of your emotional state today, how you're feeling about the world, we hope these 5 things will really encourage you. So I'm looking forward to sharing these with you, Wyatt.
Yeah, let's start unpacking them as soon as we get back from the break. All right, Steve, so we're going to give 5 suggestions, 5 ways that Christians can stay involved politically after the election. And again, let's remember what politics is and what it means. Politics.
Right, because, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt, but man, that is just such a charged word. You say politics right now and I'm flinching.
Right, because we think of politics as parties, politicians, elections, all of that. And that's a big part of politics. And in English, the word has almost transformed into just meaning that. But really, the word politics comes from the Greek polis. Polis was the city-state in Greek philosophy. And it's a word that has to do with just our public life together, with the way that we interact with one another, the way that we build common ground in communities and cities. And so government is a big way that happens. But our public life is way bigger than just elections and governing officials. So when we're talking about staying engaged politically as Christians, we're talking about staying engaged in investing in our public life, in our communities, in our cities, in our neighborhoods, in the way that we create flourishing gatherings of human beings. This is politics.
And that is such a helpful definition, so clarifying, because it does take away all those phrases and thoughts that are so distracting. Corruption, politicians, the commercials we were just talking about, and just simplifies it down to the level where you and I and the people we're sharing this with live every day.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. 5 ways as a Christian you can stay engaged in politics. 5 ways you can keep your sanity, even if the person that you hate more than anything is in the office right now. And again, reminder, we don't know who that is. But if that's the case for you, 5 ways that you can stay involved. Steve, what's number 1?
One very simple thing. In your everyday world, you can simply talk to your neighbor.
And this isn't a philosophical, like, deeper meaning point, we literally mean go talk to your neighbor, to the person who lives next to you, to the house down the street, to the people in your apartment complex. Build relationships with people who live around you. This is one of the sad realities, I think, of the current state of politics in America, is that we have become so isolated. I think it's part of what has made the political rhetoric so hot is it's so much easier to be nasty to people that you don't know personally. And if all you ever engage, if the only people you engage with are your family, your people at church that think the same as you, you know, your friends who are close to you who have the same perspective on stuff, then people who are across the aisle politically, they aren't real in your life, and they become people easy to say bad things about, easy to assume
stereotype,
bad motives.
Yep.
And so make an effort this year to go build some real relationships with the people around you who don't see things the same way. So have you seen that in your life?
Well, you know, just real quick, it reminds me of something that I had introduced to me years ago, where someone just simply asked me, like, can you name your neighbors?
Yeah.
Which is a great starting point. You know, if you think on your cul-de-sac or all your adjacent neighbors, do you even know their names? And of course, then you say, talk to your neighbor. And I think of Jesus' simple command, love your neighbor as yourself. So, you know, we have some neighbors next door. It's taken us a while to get to know them. They're our newest neighbors. They have the sign out on their lawn that's like we believe in science, water is life.
The progressive creed.
Right. I don't have the creed memorized. But, you know, I mean, immediately that was probably a little politically different than Holly and I. And it took us a while to get to know them. But, man, we have just gotten after it. We've taken opportunities. I built a fence with my neighbor. A couple of weeks ago, our car alarm went off all night and kept him up. We took them a bottle of wine and apologized profusely. And we've had some great conversations with them. And now political differences, you know, they're in the rearview mirror. They're just people to us. We care about them. We know them. They matter.
That's great. Yeah, there's a story in Martin family lore that really illustrates the way that relationship can kind of bring the temperature of political disagreement down a little bit, which is my mom's side of the family lives all over the country, and we were really consistent in doing family reunions, gatherings once a year where everybody would fly into one spot and we'd spend some time together. And my mom's family, just traditionally, were all Republicans. Her and her siblings, Republican background, and this was like my mom's last name was Wolf, her maiden name was Wolf. So this is the Wolf family reunion of, I think, 1996 or whatever, some election before I was real engaged. Yeah, probably a Clinton election. And at this family reunion, my mom and her siblings and their spouses are all just railing about how horrible, the Democratic platform is, their ideas, how dumb their, everything is. And down at the end of the table, my cousin and her new husband are sitting there very quietly, just eating their food. And eventually somebody says, like, hey, what do you guys think about what's going on? They go, well, actually, we're Democrats. And it just gets silent, But the reason I bring that up is because thankfully that didn't derail the relationship at all, and they apologized. And
you were like 2, so I don't even know.
So I've only heard this story. I wasn't a part of this, but I know that today we all have super strong relationships, that we love each other, and that we don't yell at each other about politics because the relationship matters more than whatever political, discussion we're having. And so if you want to help our political situation right now, if you want to be a part of healing some of the divides, some of the divisiveness, just building real relationships with people who are different than you is a huge way you can do that.
It sounds crazy to say today, but relationships can actually transcend politics.
Absolutely. In the real world, not online.
Yes.
And just, I love that you brought up love your neighbors yourself. I think we just need to acknowledge it is difficult to love your neighbor if you don't know who they are. So
don't know their name.
So go next door and talk to your neighbor. That's number 1. Number 2, Steve, what is it?
Take a moment and write something down that you're grateful for.
Yeah. Journal.
So helpful.
And honestly, I would just really encourage anyone listening, if you are listening to this and it's the day after the election and you're panicking, if you're listening to this and it's a week or 2 weeks or whatever after the election and you're following all the pundits that are saying how horrible this next term of whoever is in power is going to be.
The apocalypse is here.
Like, make this a daily practice when you wake up in the morning, sit down with a pen and paper, and really a pen and paper, like not an Apple Note on your phone, get a pen and paper and write down 5 things that you are grateful to God for. And I love Philippians 4:8, where Paul just encourages us, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any moral excellence, and if there is anything praiseworthy, dwell on these things. And that's what we're really talking about when we're talking about journaling. What are you grateful for? What's going well? For me, the reason why this is a practice that contributes politically, because, on its face, you wouldn't think that sitting down privately in your own home and journaling
wouldn't connect the two.
But what I've just seen, especially in this political cycle, is the way that fear and panic and pessimism is contagious. That we have all these anxieties and we maybe think that they're just internal, but they're not. They change the way that we interact with one another. They change the way that we speak to one another. And that actually has ripple effects. And so one of the ways that you can participate in bringing about the flourishing of your family and your community and your workplace and all of that is by getting your heart right with the Lord in private, by getting some perspective of the fact that there really are actually a lot of great things going on that God has done and great things that God has given us. And doing the best you can to stop being one of the people that's continuing that panic spiral.
It's so earthy. We could almost entitle this particular episode Grassroots Politics. Like, this is real grassroots politics. And both of these suggestions, talking to your neighbor and being grateful, get you down into the everyday earthiness of life. And you're just reminded that there's still so much good around you. Yeah. I was a little down the other day about something completely unrelated to politics, but I just found myself remembering this wonderful meal some new friends of ours shared with us recently. They barbecued for us, and we had the most wonderful conversation. And just like gratitude's like a superpower. You know, it just changes your perspective on everything. And in a world where politics can turn dark so quickly, make you think the end is really near, you really do well to remember there's so much good in the world.
Can I push the envelope a little bit? Because if anybody listens to us and actually does this and you're journaling, I would actually encourage you specifically, not every day, but at least once, force yourself to write down 5 things that you think are good about the fact that whoever won the election won the election. Oof. And now if you're super pumped about one of these 2 people and they won, that might be really easy to do, and that's no big deal. But if you really, really did not want one of these 2 people to win and they did, it's going to be really hard. If you maybe are like many people who are just like, I think these options are both horrible, I don't think there's any good in either of them being in power, it might be hard for you as well. But if you hear that challenge and you think like 5 good things about this person being in power and your immediate reaction is like, there aren't any, like there are 0 good things about this person being in power, just recognize like you have bought the lie. Like the world is more complicated than a binary black and white where some political person is 100% evil and all their ideas are bad and everything they do is going to be bad. Like, that is not the real universe. That is the universe that political campaigns and pundits and whatever try to create for you to motivate you to do something. Like, come back to reality where human beings are complex and have a mix of good and bad in them, and there is a silver lining to even the biggest rain cloud. So force yourself to bring some gratitude even to the way that you're thinking about our political reality right now.
That's going to be tough for some of us, I think.
I'll be honest, man. I'm on a high horse right now. It's going to be tough for me. I'll just be completely straight with you.
I think for all of us.
All right, Steve, what's number 3?
Pray for your leaders. And this one, Wyatt, obviously comes right out of the scriptures. Paul encourages us to pray for those God has placed in power. Wow, God places them in power. Actually,
we this command in the New Testament several times. Just one of them from 1 Timothy chapter 2. First of all, then I urge you that petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for everyone, for kings and all those who are in authority, so that we may lead a tranquil and quiet life in all godliness and dignity. This is good, and it pleases God, our Savior, who wants everyone to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. I love that example of the command, because it explains in a little bit more depth why we're to pray for our leaders, and I think it implies kind of how we're to pray for our leaders as well. Because I think often when today we pray for, say we pray for the president of the United States, Biden is the president right now as we speak, and so you're going to pray for President Biden. I think a lot of Christians, they obey that command by like praying that Biden would, if I'm being totally honest, I think a lot of like more right-leaning Christians, no matter the testimony of a Democratic president, will just pray that they get saved. And you're like, well, like they profess Christ, but no, it doesn't matter.
They're de facto unsaved. Yes,
pray that they get saved, but then you pray that that they would make good decisions, that they would make good policy decisions, and kind of what you're praying for is like, be more like my political perspective. Like that's the prayer that we pray for our politicians. But what Paul is saying here is pray that whoever is in charge would lead in a way that they would just get out of the way of the gospel and the church. Like it's not about changing government, because government is what's going to make things better. It's just praying, let us lead quiet lives. Let us get about the work of the ministry and preach the gospel so that more people can get saved. And whether whoever's in power is a Democrat, is a Republican, is whatever, like that's the kind of prayer is let the church be the church. Let the work of the kingdom move forward. Just don't hinder that. That's the prayer that we can all pray no matter who's in power.
And there's a real edge to this one, too, because, when Paul wrote these words, the Emperor Nero was in power. And you and our show producer, Luke, and I, we were talking about this. Luke actually did a little research for us on Nero. Of course, a lot of our listeners will know Nero through the film Gladiator. Mm-hmm. He was diabolical, putting Christians to the most horrible tortures in the arena. But on Nero's character, Luke found this description. It's horrifying. The young Nero eventually had his mother stabbed to death for treason and his wife Octavia beheaded for adultery. He then had Octavia's head displayed for his mistress Poppaea, whom years later he kicked to death when she was pregnant. This is quite a guy that Paul is telling us to submit to and pray for.
Absolutely. And I think it's a word to any of us who cringe a little bit at the command to pray for our leaders. You're like, I don't want to pray for this person. Like, we have it pretty easy. Like, if you had to pray for Nero, I think maybe you would be in a little bit tougher spot than just having to pray for an American politician in the 21st century. All right. So number 3 is pray for our leaders. Steve, what's number 4?
Number 4, really, really simple. Go to church. Show up.
We're a couple of pastors here, so it's a little self-serving.
Maybe.
But in all honesty, like, I think this is more profound than many people realize. We talked in the opening episode, and I encourage people to go back and listen to the first episode in this series about the ladder of influence. And this is what we're getting at in Go to Church. When you think about the state of our nation, the state of our lives, of our future, of our communities, of our families, there is such a temptation to think that the presidency matters so much. And I'm not saying the president doesn't matter, but the reality is that the things low on the ladder of influence, your family, your friends, your relationships with people at church, your brothers and sisters there, your church community, they have such an impact on people's lives. And so if you want a thriving community, if you want the people that you love, the people that live in your home with you, your neighborhood, if you want your neighborhood to thrive, recognize that a thriving church in your community is going to have more impact on people's lives than changing out whoever is in the Oval Office. And you have an opportunity to bring that about. Like, you have the opportunity to show up in a church community and invest and pour out your life and start building a thriving church that's really going to change the lives all around you. And so show up to church every week, like, and not just to watch services, but to build relationships, to be in a small group, to serve, to pour out, like, watch what God does with that.
And we've talked about this before, but I mean, look at who Jesus gathered around him. His 12 disciples came from every part of the spectrum politically. And one of the things I love about showing up to church is that I know I am worshiping next to people who believe very differently than I do politically, and it just doesn't matter one whit. Like, we care about each other, we love each other. I think about our Compassion Center on Tuesday nights where we serve food to our neighbors here, and our lead question isn't, what's your political, identity? Like, we just love people.
Yeah.
the church gives us a great opportunity to express the love of Jesus in concrete ways that just transcends so much of this political turmoil we live in.
So true. All right, Steve, last one.
Last one. 3 words, be a prophet. That sounds a little hard, Wyatt. I don't have a white cloak to wear around. Tell me what this one means. I think this was your idea.
Well, this one is for our folks listening who actually like getting involved in governmental politics. I mean, so what I'm talking about is the people who watch cable news, who follow, the New York Times or whatever, who are up on this. They enjoy the conversation, or at least they feel like they have to be in the conversation. There's the poll here. Like, I'm gonna follow the news. I'm gonna read what the Senate is talking about. I'm going to read what the president is
Watch
saying.
Every debate.
And I really care about politics. I care about, a certain vision for our country and what would be good and what would be bad. And I'm going to have those conversations. And so far, everything we've said is not that at all. It's out of the governmental politics sphere. When we say be a prophet, what I'm saying is, okay, if you're going to engage in governmental political conversation with folks, one of the best ways that you can help this conversation is by remembering who is actually going to listen to you. And it isn't the other side. They don't care what you think. If you are a Republican and you're a Trump person and you believe in what Trump's policies and the tariffs and whatever, like you railing about that, you going online and talking about that, no Democrat who votes for Harris is going to listen for 1 second to anything you say. But people in your own tribe might actually listen to you. And if on both sides of this conversation, people were more concerned with improving their own team, in calling out some of the excess on their own side, of calling out some of the hypocrisy on their own side, of calling out some of the moral failure on their own side, rather than just pointing a finger at all those things on the other team, we might actually be able to make things a little bit better. And that's what a prophet is. So, Steve, like many people think prophet means like you stand up and you call out the other side and you tell people how bad they are. But if you read the Bible, it's actually not that way.
It's different. And we also think that the prophet always tells us what the future is going to look like if the bad guys are in control.
Correct.
But there's so many places where we can look and see that prophecy was actually aimed inwardly. It was aimed at our team. This is from the Psalms, and we don't always think of the Psalms as prophetic, but David often spoke, and others, in a prophetic tone. And here's one of his Psalms, Psalm 55, where he says, "The city's walls are patrolled day and night against invaders." Wow, here we go, setting it up.
The threat is outside.
It's outside.
Yeah.
But the real danger, he says, is wickedness within the city. Everything is falling apart. Threats and cheating are rampant in the streets. It is not an enemy who taunts me. I could bear that. It's not my foes who so arrogantly insult me. I could have hidden from them. It's you, my equal, my companion, my friend.
Yeah.
Man, doesn't that just hit home? Like when we think about, we've talked about this too. Joshua Ryan Butler, who you had on the last podcast, talks so eloquently about how politics has ripped families and churches apart. And to hear David say that, 2,500 years ago, 3,000 years ago, is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the prophet Jeremiah as well. And I mean, just such a great example of how the job of the prophet was to critique the home team. It was to look at your brothers and your sisters, the people who you're on the same side with, and say, hey, we're not getting this right. Jeremiah, speaking of God's own people, and this is in Jeremiah, where are we here? This is Jeremiah 4, verse 22. It says, "For my people are foolish. They know me not." This is Jeremiah speaking the words of God. "They are stupid children. They have no understanding. They are," quote, "wise in doing evil." And this job of the prophet was never a particularly popular one.
They weren't very well received by the home team.
And I think especially in political conversation today, that's why this doesn't happen very much. There is very much this sense, really on both sides, that we're in this existential war against the bad guys. And if you critique your own side, you're a traitor. I mean, are distracting from the real problem, which is the other side. And yet, I think if we're going to heal some of the divisiveness in our country, if we're going to heal some of the brokenness within families and all of that you've pointed to, we're going to need more people who are brave enough to say, I'm going to risk being ostracized by some of my own friends and people who think the same way, to be willing to be a prophet and to call out what isn't right, even on our own side.
One of the things I found myself thinking about, and I'm certainly not alone, a lot of us, find ourselves thinking about, why has politics become a religion, as Joshua Ryan Butler said. I mean, it's just elevated to this level of religion-like status for so many in the church and outside the church. And I was thinking about that, in terms of certainty, because I think human beings crave certainty, and one of the things that politics gives us an illusion of is certainty. There's good guys, bad guys. There's black, there's white, there's binary. There's my team, your team. And what you're talking about here is, no, there's good on both sides and there's evil in both sides. If you want certainty, watch the World Series this weekend, because, the boundaries are there, the balls and strikes, there's a winner, there's a loser. I mean, but life and politics don't give us a lot of certainty. That's why we have a God who tells us what we can be certain about. Jesus is on the throne.
That's a great word. See, I just want to close by speaking specifically to our friends out there who, if they're honest, if in their own soul, they know they're panicking a little bit. They're not happy. This election didn't go their way. They're fearful for the future of the country. And I just want to issue a challenge, and it's a challenge I'm actually going to take myself. So my future self will take this challenge in the week after the election, when it's peak fear for certain groups of people, peak anxiety, peak panic. What if you just took a fast from the news, from cable television, from online news sources, from all the political pundits? Just turn it off.
Hold on here a minute, Wyatt. First of all, you tell me I have to write down 5 things I like about my political, opponent, and now you're telling me I'm going to take a week off of news completely.
Yeah, the country, the world, it will still be here when you get back. I'm almost certain of it. And I think sometimes we have to realize that our habits, that the way that we're engaging with the world, is hurting our walk with the Lord and not helping it. And if in the quiet in your own heart, that that's true of the way you're engaged in the political conversation right now, that politics is not making it easier for you to love your neighbor. It's making it harder for you to love your neighbor. It's not making it easier to have the peace of the Holy Spirit. It's making it harder. Then just get there just 1 week. Just try it. See how it goes. And so here's my commitment to myself. On November 6th, after I know who's won the election, I'm going to take a week off. My news source habit is I read the New York Times and I read Fox News, try to get a little bit of both. And I'm going to put both of those websites on the restricted list on my Safari browser, not access them. I never listen to cable news. We don't have cable, but I won't even do that. And I'm just going to take a break and not get caught up in the whirlwind of all the reactions that I know will be there in that week. And I'll get caught up on that afterwards. I'm not giving it up forever, but I'm going to take a week and try to do some good for my soul. So I want to invite you to join me, Steve. We'll invite all of our listeners to do that as well.
Well, why this is actually not a big challenge for me, because I'm not quite the news junkie that you are. My motto in life is ignorance is bliss. But actually, you've put a little thought in my head, a challenge I'll issue to myself. I just thought of this as you were speaking. Maybe I'll issue it to some of our listeners too. Writing down that list of 5 things, if it's the person, whoever wins, 5 things that I can appreciate about the person that I didn't vote for, didn't want in, and I'm going to verbally seek to share those with someone the week after the election.
It's good. All right, Steve, hold each other to it.
All right.
Love talking with you today. Thanks.
You too. Good stuff. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Native Exiles. Wyatt and I have shared some of our thoughts, some of the things that we're trying to put into our lives as we're wrestling through the outcome. Wherever you find yourself, we hope this has been of help to you. We hope you're experiencing God's peace in your life. And if it has been of help, please share it with somebody else. Come back, listen again. And in the meantime, we'll look forward to seeing you again next time on Native Exiles.